If you are worried you have Lyme disease, or just like the outdoors, and want the peace of mind of knowing whether you have Lyme disease or not, there is a new Lyme screening test based on decades of research by Dr. Richard Marconi, a professor at VCU Medical Center. For more information, visit glymedx.com, that's glymedx.com, or email at info@glymedx.com.
Infectious diseases, research, medicine, health. Welcome to Outbreak News Interviews. And now, broadcasting from the Outbreak News Skylar Studios in beautiful West Central Florida, here is your host, microbiologist and editor of OutbreakNewsToday.com, Robert Harriman.
Well, hey everybody, this is Robert, and welcome to the program. And it's Tuesday evening, and that means we're talking parasites. And tonight we'll be looking at the protozoa Cryptosporidium, or crypto. And joining me, as always, is parasitology teacher and author, Rosemary Drisdelle. Hi, Rosemary, and welcome back to the show.
Hi, lovely to be here.
Great. Let's start with the basics. What is Cryptosporidiosis, and how common is it?
Cryptosporidiosis is a diarrheal disease that's caused by a very small protozoan parasite. It's common all over the world, particularly common in the tropics, but we can't say that it's uncommon in places like North America because actually it's estimated that in the U.S. each year there are about 750,000 cases of Cryptosporidiosis.
Okay, so in other words, it's very common.
It is.
Yeah.
It's common.
And what is the life cycle, and how is crypto spread?
The life cycle is complicated. The infective stage is a tiny stage called an oocyst, and we swallow this often in contaminated water, but sometimes it's passed directly person to person. Sometimes it might be contaminated food. Once that oocyst gets into the intestine, then it excysts and 4 little sporozoids, which almost look like little crescent moons, come out. And they can penetrate into the lining of the intestine. They get inside the intestinal cells, so they're sort of inside the cell wall, and there they start to multiply. They go through an asexual stage of multiplication, so they multiply, burst out of the cell, invade new cells, multiply again, burst out, and they'll go through this through a number of cycles, which, as you can imagine, causes a lot of tissue damage. Eventually, they'll form sexual stages, so male and female parasites, which give rise to the oocysts, which are then passed in the stool out into the outside world.
And so what are the symptoms of Cryptosporidiosis, and when do they begin, and how long do the symptoms last?
The key symptom of Cryptosporidiosis is watery diarrhea. Very unpleasant watery diarrhea that can actually last a long time. It might be a couple of weeks. It might be up to a month. Sometimes the symptoms come and go a little bit. And in patients who can't clear the infection on their own, it can be almost unlimited. It becomes a chronic disease. Other symptoms that people experience are things, of course, like stomach cramps, abdominal pain, dehydration as a result of the prolonged diarrhea, sometimes nausea and vomiting, but really the diarrhea is the key thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, who's most at risk for Cryptosporidiosis, and what are the risk factors?
Anybody can get Cryptosporidiosis. Really, none of us are immune. But those who tend to have the more severe disease are people with immune problems. So patients with HIV, cancer patients, organ recipients, or people with other types of immune problems. So in those cases, their immune systems can't fight off the infection. Most of us, even though it can be prolonged and very unpleasant, we will get over Cryptosporidiosis on our own eventually.
How's it diagnosed?
It's diagnosed with a stool sample. Traditionally, we used to look for the oocysts in stool samples as we do for other parasites. They're small, but they tend to float. So they can be there's a risk always of kind of pouring them off in the supernatant in the sample, but if you do get a good sample of crypto, they're quite sort of unique and easily recognizable in a wet mount, and they can also be stained in the lab. But nowadays we also have rapid tests. So a rapid panel, an antigen-antibody method that can detect them much quicker and with much less laborious work than the routine stool sample.
Right. And how's it treated?
Well, as I said, most people will get over it on their own eventually. If it is necessary to treat it, there is one drug, which is nitazoxanide, which can be used to treat it. That's really the only thing we have.
And how about prevention? How could somebody like you or me prevent ourselves from contracting this parasite?
Well, as always, hand hygiene is one of the key things, so making sure that we wash our hands before eating, make sure that we're drinking clean water all the time, and avoiding foods that could be contaminated. Unfortunately, Cryptosporidium is responsible for more than half of the diarrhea outbreaks caused by chlorinated swimming pools because it is very resistant to chlorine. So sometimes, it's there and you have no idea, and before you know it, you're sick.
And Rosemary, any unique or interesting stories about crypto?
Well, the biggest crypto story has to be the outbreak that happened in Milwaukee in the 1990s. There was a water treatment plant that there was a problem with the turbidity in the water, and they weren't really able to get the water thoroughly clean. And over 400,000 people came down with cryptosporidiosis. I can only imagine what it would have been like to be working in one of the labs in Milwaukee at that time. They must have been simply buried under stool specimens.
Yeah.
So that was the one that really put crypto on the map for everybody.
Yeah, and that really affected those people that you talked about earlier, the people with immune deficiencies with HIV. There was a lot of problems with that up in Milwaukee.
That's right. There were over 100 deaths.
Yeah. Incredible story. All right. Well, thanks again, Rosemary. I truly appreciate your time and expertise.
Always my pleasure.
Thank you, ma'am.